I thank the gentleman. I want to thank the witnesses for their testimony today, for your decades of service to the country. I think you exemplify so many courageous men and women who serve in the diplomatic corps, who've served in our military, who represent the United States so well around the world. I appreciate how you endeavored to stay out of the fray, to relate what you heard, what you saw, without additional commentary. That is as it should be. You were both compelled to appear, and we are grateful that you answered the lawful subpoenas that you received. The story that you have shared with us today and your experiences, I think, is a very deeply troubling one. It is the story of a dedicated ambassador, someone who served with great distinction, Ambassador Yovanovitch, who was the subject of a vicious smear campaign at the beginning of the year. It is the story of once this ambassador was pushed out of the way, the creation of a irregular channel, which Ambassador Taylor, you described, went all the way from the president through Mick Mulvaney, through Ambassador Sondland, through Ambassador Volker, to Rudy Giuliani. That over time became apparent was not serving the U.S. interest, but running deeply contrary to the U.S. interest, was in fact conditioning a White House meeting that the President of Ukraine desperately sought to establish himself as the new President of Ukraine and to demonstrate to friend and foe alike that he had a relationship with his most powerful patron, the United States of America, and conditioned $400 million of bipartisan taxpayer-funded military support for a nation at war on the front lines of Russian expansionism. A suspension of which was not in the U.S. interest, not in Ukraine's interest, not in our national security interest in no way, shape, or form. You've described a situation in which those in the service of the president made it clear to the Ukrainians they need to publicly announce these investigations or they weren't going to get that meeting, and they sure weren't going to get that military assistance. Now, I would point out, and this may not have come to your attention, but it certainly came to our attention. On September 9th, the Inspector General informed our committee that the Director of National Intelligence was withholding a whistleblower complaint in violation of the statute. By that point, on September 9th, that complaint had made its way to the White House. On September 9th, when the Inspector General informed Congress that that complaint had been withheld, the White House also learned that Congress now inevitably would learn about the complaint. It was less than 48 hours later that the military aid would be released. Over the weeks to come, or over the days to come, rather, we will hear from other dedicated public servants about other aspects of this effort to invite foreign interference in our election, to condition a White House meeting and military aid for the performance of political favors for the president's reelection campaign. We will hear from other witnesses. I appreciate members on both sides of the aisle who I think participated today in a serious way and in a civil way. This is as it should be. There is no shortage of strong feelings about what this means to the country. At the end of the day, we're going to have to decide, based on the evidence that you and others provide, whether we're prepared to accept in the presence of the United States a situation where the president, for their own personal or political benefit, can condition military aid, diplomatic meetings, or any other performance of an official act in order to get help in their reelection. Whether we will need to accept in this president or any future president the idea that the President of the United States can invite a foreign country to intervene in our affairs. These are the decisions we will have to make when we have to decide whether this president should be impeached. But I want to thank you again. Just conclude by saying, because I can't let it go unanswered, Some of my colleagues made the statement repeatedly that I've met with the whistleblower, that I know who the whistleblower is. It was false the first time they said it. It was false the second through 40th time they said it. It will be false the last time they say it. With that, this concludes this portion of the hearing. I want to thank you, gentlemen. I ask everyone to remain in their seats. The witnesses are excused. Please allow them to leave the committee room. We will, once they leave the committee room, take a brief recess, and then we will resume to take up Mr. Conaway's motion. And once again, I thank you, gentlemen.